So, our dear human relatives, welcome to our 255th, 255 online gathering for faith leaders across the country, with a focus this year on creating beloved community. This regular gathering is sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. I am Jason O'Neill. I use any and all pronouns, and I am honored to be one of your facilitators today.
And as you all know, I'm Reverend Solveig Nilsson Gooden. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm your other facilitator today, and gratefully so. And in attunement with the Truth and Healing movement of the ELCA, moving toward right relationship with our Indigenous siblings and neighbors, we'll begin with a land acknowledgement, as has been our practice throughout this year. We are gathered together from all parts of Turtle Island, also referred to as North America. We are connected by the breath given us by the breath maker and by the very piece of Mother Earth, the land that each of us inhabits today. We understand that all land is Indigenous land, and we invite each of you to name in the chat the Indigenous peoples or tribal nations whose lands you occupy now. We acknowledge the terror of colonialism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, broken treaties, stolen land, forced removal, and boarding schools, as well as the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and children each year, and the ripple effects of violence still being experienced today. We know that Indigenous peoples are not historical subjects, but are part of our communities. They offer invaluable wisdom for how we exist in relationship with Mother Earth, as well as our human and non-human neighbors.
Also important for us to offer a labor acknowledgement. With permission granted by Dr. Tara T.J. Stewart, we acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their ascendants, who suffered the horror of transatlantic trafficking, slavery, and Jim Crow laws. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be felt and witnessed today.
So, of course, another vital part of creating beloved community is fostering a sense of belonging. So we encourage you to include your pronouns in your name on Zoom, and of course, access any of the closed captions as you need. So we'll continue our work toward healing and justice by entering into a place of peace and listening together. Through these regular gatherings, we've developed a covenant of how we enter and interact in this space. We're committed to creating a safer and braver space where each of us are able to bring the truth of who we are and how we're doing. If you share something today that you wish for us to edit out of the recording, just let us know afterwards. And with all this said, we affirm these conversations are meant to be an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ, the beloved community. As Bell Hooks wrote in All About Love, rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. So today is our last session, journeying with Indigenous author Vine Deloria Jr. and engaging with Custer Died for Your Sins, an Indian manifesto. And just a reminder, one last reminder about our journey together. We're all learning from this Indigenous elder through his writing. So we are not teaching, we're just facilitating this space each month.
As such, it feels important to begin our reading circle one more time this month with context from the last paragraph of the preface. But the Indian task of keeping an informed public available to assist the tribes in their efforts to survive is never ending. And so the central message of this book, that Indians are alive, have certain dreams of their own, and are being overrun by the ignorance and the mistaken, misdirected efforts of those who would help them, can never be repeated too often.
And again, one last time, we'll just remember our covenant together. And this is wisdom that we can bring to whatever groups that we're in, of course. The invitation is to share from our head and our heart together to practice awareness of space and time, to step up and to step back, honoring our own voices and the voices of all those in the group, and to remember that we are always learning, and that is the point. So, throughout this time, we have been focusing on one chapter at a time and sharing quotes from that chapter. And of course, we have read through the whole book at this point together. And so what Jason and I were imagining for this last session is that we would kind of divide our time into two sections. The first half, so now till about 9:30ish, we'll reflect on a couple of questions that are going to be shared in the chat. Jason's going to share those in the chat. These are questions that came from the study guide that was developed by I think Vance and maybe somebody else together to go along with this book. And Jason and I have been kind of weaving some of those questions through. You maybe didn't know it, but we were weaving some of those questions through from the study guide through this year. And so we just wanted to give us these couple of questions for our reflection. So we'll take a couple minutes just for our own reflection. You can type some notes on your own, or you can put some in the chat. But in this first half, to just reflect on our learnings from this book together. And then the second half, and again, we'll check in at about 9:30ish. We wanted to open up a time for sharing and conversation about as people who have journeyed through this book together. What's bubbling up for you? What thoughts or wonderings or imaginings do you have interest in? Do you have capacity for continuing to learn into next year? Do you have any imaginings for what that might be, or how you might want to do that, and how ELCA Coaching Ministry might be able to support that? No promises, but just want to open up that question after this experience of this year. What's percolating? What are some next steps that you would like to take? And what might that look like? So does that all sound okay for our time together? Any questions, thoughts, clarifications you want to jump in with at this point? Okay. So so let's just take maybe 3 or 4 minutes to maybe 4 or 5, just because these are big questions. To do our own reflection on these questions that Jason put in the chat. And then we'll come back together and we'll just open it up for sharing.
And then just in case somebody doesn't have access to the chat as well as for the recording, I'm going to go ahead and read those aloud right now as well. So how has the book changed your overall perspective on Native peoples and tribes? How has it altered your view of the past, present, and future of the United States? And how has it changed your thoughts on the church's approach to Indigenous ministries and tribal relations? First set of questions. Second set of questions. After reading Custer Died for Your Sins, do you think there are challenges that Deloria writes about that Indigenous people and Native nations continue to face, and what might those be? Most importantly, what do you want to learn more about? What do you feel called to do? We need longer. All right, lay it on us. Jill, I see you leaning in. Are you wanting to talk?
You know me, I'm never afraid to talk or talk first. Um, yes, I appreciate the opportunity to type stuff out because I love journaling. And so to the first question, and really it was labeled number 9, right? Like I'm not misreading that in the chat. Okay. I thought maybe there were 8 other questions that I was supposed to look at and I didn't. I really feel like this book has reinforced how, and I don't mean to use this term in uh, a dishonoring way, but how whitewashed my thinking is, and really exposes how much truth needs to be exposed, especially in the United States of America, of how white European settlers started relationship with the indigenous peoples and what they really did and the horror of that. Um, yes, it's just like that has just been scratched off the surface for me. One of the ways that this has taken root in my family, like this intentional ongoing learning, is my family loves to watch different series together. So we just started watching Dark Winds, made sure I did some checking to make sure that it is a series that is affirmed by Indigenous peoples. And yes, there are things that still should be sharpened as far as authenticity. But one of the things that that series does well is hires actors that are Indigenous. And so the thing that is beautiful is the conversation that happens in my family unit after we watch an episode. And I think that that's one of the ways that we reshape one another's understanding is having these honest conversations that happen outside of this beautiful group that meets and does this. And I think that the other thing that I'm really called to do is to take more faithful steps in building relationships with Indigenous peoples, so I can learn more firsthand, um, and um, and in those relationships, not that it's an extraction of, I'm just trying to learn from you, but really try to be an authentic relationship in ways that are organic. And in that process, that will equip me to speak more fully to the truth, and be a fuller participant in the healing that needs to happen.
I think it was so reinforced over and over and over again, almost every chapter, the greed and the unjust and the broken promises and the sense that we know how to fix you. So
Well, in building on what Tammy just said, the depth of the awfulness of what has happened and the pervasiveness, the expansiveness, and it continues. And so the scope of everything has hit me. One place my own thinking is going is how am I doing similar things now in my own world? Maybe not to Indigenous people because of my location, but other groups that I am responding to, reacting to, helping, whatever, in the same way. So that's one place that I'm going.
I would say the detail of what's happened in the past. I mean, some things I just broadly knew, but just to know the details, and that's so much of it's still continuing. And I forgot my other thought.
I think this book reminded me, or maybe pointed out, how I feel like there's an impassable gulf between the indigenous values and westernized colonial values. And I feel like it's a bigger, like, indigenous in many different places, not just American indigenous, and Western culture values are just so different. It's so hard to wonder how to break that down. I guess we don't I don't know if it's possible to break it down in our culture, but maybe how do I break it down in myself? And I was mentioning something to my mom the other day about the things that the steps that the ELCA is attempting to do in the land back movement. And I feel like that was a thing that she had no idea about. Like, she was like, doing what? The concept. And I'm like, well, she raised me to be, to be the person that I am. And I think she has values. Like, she has the desire to have decolonized values, but that's not how she grew up, in white America. So I just wonder, like, what are the things, the little things in my circle of influence that I can do to decolonize, how my family or the people who I work with or influence, can have that perspective, like the perspective that no one owns the land and truly we steward it. It's not like give it back because it's theirs, but give it back because they're the stewards of it. And so, yeah, I'm hoping to, like, instead of go, oh, what are we going to do to fix white supremacy? It's like, or what am I going to do to decolonize my everyday life?
Just a quick thing. I'll add something you just said, Stephanie, just sparked this in me about like the layers of decolonization, and right, like moving from land as commodity to land as actually something more sacred, to the relationship with indigenous peoples and the stewardship and whatever. And recently I've been trying to think about removing removing indigenous people from their land is like family separation. So when we think about that, we think about like what's happening and with immigration and people at the borders and the ICE raids and whatever. Like, it's family separation. It's a tool of colonization, and thinking about separating people from their land is actually family separation. And it's like, okay, wow, that is so different from land as property. Oh my gosh, right? So different. So anyway, thank you for spurring that remembering for me.
I live on a river, and I love that when I look out the window now and look at the river, I think of it as my sibling. I've always respected creation, I think. Um, but this teaching is reshaping, and to your point, that's a family member flowing out that window. And there's a there's a distinct difference that comes with that understanding.
One thing I've been thinking about is I think back to this journey over the months with this book. I remember a time, maybe 4 or 5 sessions in, where we were just so overcome with the weight of everything. We just had to move into silence. And I think I've been thinking about the words truth and healing, that you have to tell the truth, and to look at the truth is hard stuff. Part of what you look at is out there, but part of it is then looking back at yourself. And there is just a lament that you have to stop for lament before you can do healing, and before you can move into relationship or helping. And as white people, we're all really quick to move. Well, let's fix it. And I appreciate that we made time in that session for that weight, the sorrow, the grief. And I noticed that in other sessions, it's like somehow we've moved into a different place. And that's helpful to me, just knowing as I do any kind of work in the justice area.
I just put in the chat and I forget for the recording from our gathering just last week. Jane, connected to what you were saying. All progress starts by telling the truth. A quote by Dan Sullivan.
That's an interesting thing to think about as we're being confronted with truth. What is true? And the ways in which truth are being polluted and disguised and diminished.
I think building on what you just said, Tammy, about truth, I mean, we've heard Vine Deloria's Jr.'s take on the situation, and frankly, his analysis of history writ broad is just breathtaking to me. The scope of what he knows and has mastered and can pull together. But I also know that's his take, and I know from reading. I've been reading about the Meskwaki people here in Iowa. It's the one group of people who still live on the land, and in reading a history of their long migration to get to Iowa and how they managed to hold on and settle and how they have survived in that. There's also multiple truths within that, and points where the Meskwaki tribe, nation, I forget their word, but it's not just one view. And so part of what I'm trying to also hold on to is just the complexity that among the Indigenous people, there's also common truth, but there's also then where they stand in different parts. And so to try to not homogenize everything because of that.
I finally found a quote that has really been sticking with me. It got in and like it like reshaped kind of everything. And it was from the 3rd chapter. And it was this he says, when the Kennedys and King were assassinated, people wailed and moaned over the sick society. Most people took the assassinations as a symptom of the deeper rot that had suddenly set in. They needn't have been shocked. America has been sick for some time. It got sick when the first Indian treaty was broken. It has never recovered. And I don't even know what to say about that, but it just shifted my perspective on I guess it helped. One of the things it helped me do is to help me just release any of the white savior, we can fix this thinking. Like, no. No, actually. I mean, we can, right? We know what the path to healing looks like, but it's not about fixing and making anything better in our lifetime, because that's the root of it. Anyway, it was a gift to be liberated from that distorted thinking. Well, we'll shift to the next part of the conversation, but just want to make sure that everyone has had a chance to speak. If you would like to speak in response to these couple questions, or just anything you want to say that's coming to your mind and heart as we're kind of wrapping up our reflection on the book itself and on our experience of reading it together.
I would just say that in response to that question about the church's approach, there is so very much work that needs to be done. The church's approach to Indigenous ministries and tribal relations might be on a good path, but there is so much work to be done.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's this book, as it should be, will be working on me for the rest of my life. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to reflect on it with all of you over the course of this year. So if feel free, if something last like comes to your mind or heart, chime in, but let's give ourselves a little space to turn forward and think about what is bubbling up for you about about a next step. What might you be interested in, going deeper in with this group, not with this group. What's percolating for each of you? Let's just take some time to name some of those pieces and see what emerges.
Been thinking a lot about the journey and the trauma that has been a result of all of this for the Indigenous people. So there's part of me that, thinks about that piece and how it impacts their way of life. And then I also wondered about just thinking about how they are indeed wisdom keepers, and how is it that we help to recognize and restore that some of that wisdom to the forefront of our thinking. And I guess the other piece that I think about is restorative justice, and what is its role and how might it help? What can I do personally around that?
What are we doing? Let's support in every possible way those who are participating in cultural regeneration and cultivating the deep wisdom that is right there. And we have that opportunity to support that in any way that we can, with land or with money or with volunteering or with organizing or whatever. And so that to me is my ongoing work and commitment is around helping facilitate, especially around the specific process of land return, but any means, any and all means of redirecting like energy and intention toward cultivation of culture and worldview and values and wisdom that are essential for all of our survival and for Indigenous thriving, cultural thriving. Maybe I'll shift to the coaching question. What is your next right step? Is that the question? Your next best step? Your next right step?
Next most faithful step.
Next most faithful step. Yes, the question. What's your sense of what is your next most faithful step in this particular journey? There's lots of journeys we're all on. But in this particular one,
for me, it's building on some initiatives in my congregation where we have a new pastor, so some of our work around racial justice which has been at loose ends through our period of interims, is starting to settle back in and to see how we can, to see what the congregation can do, and then in my circumstances and capacities, where do I fit as a supporter of that? And that's taking discernment kind of in the same way as white people not jumping in and having the answer for everybody. For me to not jump in and tell my congregation what they ought to be, because that never goes well with anybody. And so to just try to sit and watch that, and that is the closest thing at hand, much as your survey is there, what's happening in your synod, so you can support that.
I would say my next step is just to continue that, as Stephanie was talking about, decolonization. It's just so ingrained. So it's just constantly taking that time to learn and reflect on where that isn't in myself. And then the other part, my hobby is ancestry. So just connecting with my ancestors and learning of where they originated from. But to me, that's just the big journey, is just to continue to be conscious, continue to learn, be conscious of how it's playing it outside in our own. And then I've tried to be intentional in terms of preaching and sharing my journey with my congregation and using examples.
My next faithful step is to do some work on learning what's in place in the penitentiary setting for the Indigenous population to experience their own heritage and to learn their own heritage and to grow into that space, and where there can be advocacy for that sort of work to be done. Maybe it's being done and I don't know it, but I guess I want to learn what's being done, and maybe if there's a gap or some way in which there's some connections I can make with the prison ministry to see what might fill a gap.
I resonate with what Sylvia said about learning about your own heritage. That was one of the things that I came out of my IDI assessment with, that my intercultural minimization, I feel like, comes from not knowing who my people are, who my culture is, and thinking about who my heritage is, both separately and connected with what my culture is. That was one of my steps. I do want to also learn more about my heritage, but I had made a goal last year to read more books by people of color than white people. And what got in the way of that was my doctoral studies. Because there's a lot of stuff written by white people. So I'm going into heavier theology reading next year. A lot of the reading I've been doing has been practicum around certain areas. So I'm going to work hard to find Indigenous theology to read, Indigenous and other theologies of people of color to read. And the good thing about my doctoral program is almost nothing is prescribed what I have to read. I get to decide. I just need to find things that are. It's a big picture of theology, so I'm sure I can find things that will be valuable to my studies, my doctoral studies, and my personal decolonization.
So, Sove, I have the book, God is Red, um, also written by Vine Deloria Jr. And I know I've taken a couple of runs at reading it, and it's a little complex. I'm wondering if it was part of a book study, and I frankly didn't think about finding like a study guide to accompany me in trying to read that. Um, that's a book, and I'm not just mentioning it because I have it on my shelf. It I just really appreciate Vine Deloria Jr.'s humor and um, one of you named just the breadth of knowledge and weaving that all together in such a beautiful storytelling way. Yeah, anyway, that's something that I'm contemplating. Yeah, okay, thanks, Jane. Jane's saying, Jill, you could do it. You can read this.
I do have to say that it's been really helpful. I don't know that I would have stuck with it had it not been a communal study. And so, I found the approach to be really helpful, and not only just in staying on task, but having a community to process it with. So I have really appreciated that.
I would say the same thing as especially when things are in depth and complex, to have a group to break it down like that. And so often, like in seminary, it was just like there was so much reading. To me, I wish they had just say, okay, this is a smaller portion, read this in depth and, meditate and eat it. I put a book on it that I just got, but I haven't read it yet. Because I also tried to add to my library people of color books were like commentaries and things. And this is one that I came across.
Thank you, Sylvia, for the recording. I'll note that Sylvia says, Solveig checks. Start over. Words are hard today. Solveig notes, check out all things written by Randy Woodley. And Sylvia says, I haven't read this book yet, but it just came out. Reading the Bible on Turtle Island by T. Christopher, I'm going to guess, Hokolotube and H. Daniel Zacharias. I'll add a couple of my next steps. One is Jill and I have already started thinking about the language that the coaching ministry uses. Throughout all kinds of stuff. We just had a conversation this morning again. But even just, how do we talk about ministry and coaching and things that we're involved in, and how white that language is sometimes. And so how can we be more expansive while still meeting the standards we need to meet for the International Coaching Federation, for example, like where we have to use some certain language. But yeah, can we expand on that? And so that's been kind of cool to explore. So I look forward to us doing that work more. I told Sylvia about this before we started today, but a therapist friend of mine wants to do well, he's calling a reading circle now based on our work together, not a book club. So we're going to do a reading circle on decolonizing therapy. So I'm looking forward to, working with sort of outside the church with a group of folks on this decolonization work and sort of see what comes from that too. Yeah, similar to what some of y'all said, like I don't do well with a book by myself that I can't unpack with people. So I know I need community.
And Jason, say just another word about that, because what you shared with me was that it's not just about therapy.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, the author is a Black woman who has partnered with or collaborated with a bunch of different people. So it really is through multiple lenses. And she wrote it specifically because her background is therapy, but she expanded her writing. So when she published it, it's actually for all helpers. So she says coaches and spiritual directions and pastors, and I mean, just a whole list of people. If you just want to decolonize what you were taught about your field, this is a good like resource or good consideration. So much broader than therapy. Yeah, thank you for that, Sylvie.
Would you put that book title in the chat, Jason?
I will. Yeah.
Another thing that just came to me is the Indigenous translation of Scripture that is out for the New Testament, and now there's also Psalms and Proverbs. And one of the things we're working on in my church is getting that read occasionally through the year, one of the lessons or whatever. But it also, the Indigenous take on Jesus, for example, there's a freshness to the whole thing that is just pretty powerful. So if you haven't looked at that, it's worth doing.
Is that done by the same group that put out the First Nation Bible?
Jason, your comment about language reminded me of something that surprised me that Vance said in a training recently about shifting language from accompaniment to mutuality, how accompaniment is still not an equalized concept. So I found that really interesting because the ELCA has been pretty hard into accompaniment, like mission as accompaniment. So that's another rethinking shift to do.
Yeah, Steph, that was one of the hinge points that Jason and I landed on today, and the reality that we were talking about just the curriculum that we have accredited with the International Coaching Federation. And if we walk away from that word, we put a lot of our curriculum in jeopardy of not being accredited. I mean, like, so there are some of those hard realities that you're like, well, heck, or another word, what do we do with that? So, yeah. And that is just revelatory of how systemic these issues are, right? And that if we suddenly swap out accompaniment for, oh, the beautiful sentence that Jason wrote, I thought there are a lot of people in the room that are going to be going, what is that you do? And so, yeah, it's not something that we can just flip a switch. It has to be an intentional, I think, like partnering of this language and then slowly introducing this other language. And then, oh, now we're in parallel. And now we're going to start that cross. I mean, I feel like as the church, it just has to be that slow. Maybe for the rest of the world too.
So I hear your next faithful step should be working on getting the change in the accreditation group that makes that decision. Just a challenge.
It's just like a 3-year process. No problem, Sylvia. I mean, Sylvia.
I'm not a coach.
Yeah. How convenient for you, Miss Sylvia. Yes, thank you.
Well, we're getting to that time. I heard a few books mentioned, and I heard a few statements about the power and the impact and the help of reading things together. No particular consensus, but I know Jason and Jill are going to be reflecting on the ELCA coaching ministry in the coming year and what that might look like. And I would venture to say that they would continue to receive input going forward about what you need and what you want, what would be supportive.
Thank you, Sylvia. I would just add, yeah, and if you feel called or led to lead or co-lead or facilitate one of these things, please let us know that too. We're always looking for other voices for that. Jill and I don't need to be the face and name on all of these things by all means. And then, yeah, thank you for actively creating beloved community with us in this space with an objective of healing together. A reminder that we have several events on the ELCA Coaching Events webpage. Sylvie's going to put some links in the chat. I'm going to go through a few things I think y'all might be interested in as far as the reading circle and for those watching the recording. Hosted by the United Church of Christ. They are exploring Finding Joy in Advent, and they have 2 more weeks in their series. Tomorrow, Joy Through Hope, and next week, Joy Through Lament. And the recording from last week, Joy as Resistance, can be found on their YouTube channel. And then next Wednesday, December 17th, will be our last gathering of the year for Creating Beloved Community. We will take off December 24th and December 31st. But wait, there's more. Women of the ELCA is hosting their annual online Blue Christmas service on December 21st, and I'm honored to help them produce that each year. So I look forward to that if you want to join us for that. And Friday, December 26th, the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery is hosting their next decolonizing worship gathering. So that might be of interest to y'all as well.
And Tammy Devine, there is something that you shared with me that's happening. I remember the date, December 17th. If you would unmute and share that opportunity too, please.
It's actually tonight.
Oh,
It's tonight, and it's a webinar that is a part of the ELCA. The ELCA has created a curriculum, compelling gospel, and they have been sharing that in various areas of the United States. And they have asked for a Advent webinar, and it's on tonight, and it's called Centering to Share the Good News. So it's just an opportunity just to pause and to ponder and to center yourselves, which is so that we can be present to the presence.
Thank you. Friends, as we leave this space, I want us to give an intentional hand to Solveig and for Jason for curating this space for us, for, I wanted to use the word accompanying us, for journeying with us as we explored this resource. And I'm super excited to see what Spirit reveals next. And the big thing that I'm hearing is a heart from all of you beautiful souls to continue the good work. If we keep that at the center, I really trust Spirit to guide us. So my heartfelt thanks to each of you for co-creating this space with Spirit. Thank you for the light that you bring to the world, the encouragement that you bring to my soul. I'm just so grateful for, and we look forward to continuing the journey together. God bless you, friends.